Tonight's meeting to order. Tom Chapa.
Here.
Heather Del Conte. Here. Pamela Dowd. Here. Lisa Glidden. Here. James McKenzie. Here. Sean Amek. Linda Serino. Here. And Zachary DeMont. Here. If you would all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Tonight, there is no floor to the public. No one has signed up for tonight. Next is the Board of Education. Second and final reading of the policies listed below. If I could have a motion, please.
I'll move it.
Second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Just for clarity, we did pull one out of the vote, so it isn't included here.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed. Next is the superintendent's report with Dr. Keller.
Let's see there. Good evening, board. Great to see everybody back again. We have a number of items we want to kind of go over this evening, so I'll just jump right in, okay? So let's see if I could just get our board to, There we go. So I think I'll start out tonight by just, as we often do, celebrating our students. We recently had our high school present Mamma Mia this year for the play. What a fantastic performance. Our kids did a great job. They worked really hard on the play and did they did really just a great job. And I just wanted to tell them that it was great to see them and in action and just to see all the hard work come together and work really diligently to keep everybody safe at the same time. So job well done. I wanted to thank all of our kids and also the staff who really worked hard to bring that whole production together. Job well done. Just wanted to share that. Let's see. Okay. All right. So tonight, just want to now shift gears if we can and just kind of begin to talk a little bit about our capital improvement project. We have several folks who are on with us tonight from King & King, and also we have our attorney, Tom Buckle, on with us in case there's any questions or concerns. We recently went through the bidding process. All that information was completed. We have multiple contractors, with apprenticeship programs who did bid on Phase 3A. And so we're going to, I think we'll bring King up, and they will start to share with us all of the bid information and how everything went, and we'll take it one step at a time. All right.
Break your toys, is this nice, thank you. Well, thanks for having us here tonight. We did receive bids on Thursday of last week. We had, just as a summary, we had 3 general construction bids, 3 mechanical, 4 electrical, 3 plumbing, and 3 masonry. And we are happy to say that all those contractors participate in a apprenticeship program of some form, so they did meet the requirements of the project. We're also happy to say that the base bids of all the bids, when totaled, came in at $8.677 million, which is approximately 10.9% under the revised base bid budget that we had of $9.7 million. So we're pretty happy with that. The distribution was pretty tight. Usually, just as a side note, having open bids on Thursday, we usually have a little bit more time than we've had between meetings to really qualify the bids. So we had more people providing qualifications of the bidders, and we'll talk a little bit about that process and what that looks like. But our urgency tonight in really making this recommendation hinges on what we're seeing in the market, and we've seen it for probably the last year, and it's probably going to be for the next couple of years, an issue with procurement of materials as well as scheduling and manpower. So we have confirmed and validated through the qualification process with the contractors that we're recommending tonight, that they do have, they can meet the schedule, they can meet the phasing work of the work, and they do not have an issue with manpower at this time. So securing those things as soon as we can is going to be a benefit to this project, as well as making sure that we stay on track. So just to run through a little bit, we are recommending, I believe, 4 alternates that I think there's an alternate summary sheet, which is an 11 by 17 that we had Karen hand out to you. And it looks something like this.
Craig, do you want to go through each of the contractors first?
Sure.
And then go to the alternates?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll follow you.
Okay, so we have first the general construction contract.
General construction contract, we're recommending Paul A. Castaldo, Inc. of Oswego. Their base bids and the suggested alternates total $4.477 million. For mechanical, we are recommending King & King Mechanical, no relation to our company, out of Auburn, New York. And their total is $1.6 million, plus or minus. The electrical construction contract to Knapp Electric out of Auburn at $1.189. Plumbing construction to Oswego Mechanical at $488,000. And masonry restoration to Raymond E. Kelly out of Waterloo at $996,000. The total of all the contracts, including the recommended alternates, is $8,789,655. Okay. Any questions on that? Yes, Heather.
Can I just ask a question about, so as I'm looking at this, obviously the ADA, the toilet room in, let's just say, Minetto nurse's office, making it ADA. What has to happen with the electrical to make it ADA compliant? Or is it because you have to tear everything
We're
out
tearing
and replace
everything
everything?
about and rebuilding it, correct.
And then just my other question, just because I think other people in the public will have the same question, is there a reason ADA compliance wasn't embedded in the initial project?
To my knowledge, those areas were not brought into awareness that there was an issue until we actually started doing the work and finding the field work, investigating it. So it was something that we discovered that this is the only toilet, I think in Minetto, this was like the only toilet on that floor that had student access, or was there more?
Well, this is the only, at Minetto, it's the only nurse's bathroom, and it came about when we did our field work and we did our, we met with the principal and we went to the buildings. It was brought to our attention that it's very difficult with the needs of the children in that particular school to have a nurse's bathroom that is not ADA compliant. So we made it an alternate as it wasn't initially in the pre-ref scope, but saw the need to have that be ADA. And so that's why it was added in. We had hoped that we would be able to have the bids come in the way they did and put it into the regular project.
Okay, I guess I'm just kind of wondering, because I definitely think it's important, obviously. It's just kind of blowing my mind that we aren't there yet even, especially at Minetto. So I guess that's my question is, when you initially sat with principals and things, that just didn't come up? And so now it came up?
It was not part of the pre-referendum scope. When that scope was developed, it was primarily based on building condition surveys that focused on the infrastructure of the buildings, mechanical, plumbing, electrical systems, and those types of items. We knew that, for example, at the middle school, we were going to be doing a lot with the mechanical, electrical systems, and it was an open plan building at one time. So we knew that we had to address the wall partitions because they don't meet the fire code, as they were removable or demountable is what we call them. So those types of things we could accommodate in there, but not until we actually got into the work of designing it, meeting with the principals, which was part of that design process, did we start hearing about these other hot areas.
Oh, okay, I guess that was my misunderstanding, was I thought all of those meetings happened prior to
Some,
just, okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board before they continue?
Okay. So going to the, what we're saying are the recommended alternates that we would like the board to consider accepting. You'll see there's a two-tone sheet. The ones that we highlighted yellow are the ones we're recommending. The ones that kind of had that orange highlight are items that we feel could be rolled into an energy performance contract and are not necessarily critical to the operation of the building at this time. So those are things for future consideration with your efficiencies that you're working on. Those would be ideal for that type of project, okay? The ones that are not highlighted, and I'll start with the locker room, and this is similar for Fitzhugh and Kingsford. Those areas, we had, the attention was raised that the ventilation in those spaces was not adequate. It was through investigation of those spaces as well that we noted that really those spaces are not code compliant. There's no accessible route to them. There's no two ways out of the spaces. And they're really just not, should not be utilized for anything more than storage. There should not be students or staff occupying those spaces just based on the mere fact that they're not really code worthy of being used for occupancy. Perfect for storage. So that's why we said, well, we were not going to do anything with the ventilation at this time because really what should happen is if that space wants to be utilized for other purposes, offices, meeting spaces, those types of things, there's probably a bigger project that needs to be done in those other than just ventilation. So that was our suggestion for those spaces. Similar to these two buildings as well as what's called a fin tube cover replacement. So fin tube is the radiant heat that goes around the perimeter of the room. Sometimes you may have seen them in the classrooms. They look like these little linear boxes that go, and they have fluted tops and bottoms, and it's just a radiator type system for radiant heat. The base bid of the project, which is included, is the general contractors to remove that, clean, refinish, repaint, and reinstall the existing. Mr. Crisafulli had a thought that maybe when we did that, it still may have dents, it may have those types of things. They may not be able to get it all out. So he requested that maybe we look at the price of replacing those altogether. So that's what this alternate is to replace those existing fin tubes covers with new. We felt, again, for the price of that, it's an aesthetic issue. And if there was a bigger concern when we start getting into construction, that is something that possibly could be considered out of the contingencies to negotiate a better price for than what they were suggesting here. So we're recommending that not be considered. Riley, the counter solid surfacing top, basically we're replacing sinks at Riley as part of like kind of the lead abatement work or lead mitigation work that we're doing. We have the new sinks going into existing counters. Our engineer raised the question based on the counters being original, that putting a new sink in, it may not be, again, another aesthetic issue, that it might not be pleasing to have that. We did have them provide a price to replace those counters with a similar material that we're doing with new counters throughout the district, which is a solid surfacing material. We just didn't suggest that because it was more aesthetic based at this point than functional. But it's, again, up to the board if they wanted to consider that as an option. And it's, again, another thing that we could negotiate during construction to get a better price on with the contractor. The next one at Minetto is 88 toilet rooms near cafeteria. Now, this is a hefty replacement that was actually suggested or recommended by the state ed department. They see that those existing facilities aren't meeting the accessibility requirements, and they're saying they would like to have that done. Now, the district has done their due diligence, and we designed it, we presented it, we bid it, and we have a price for it. It's your option to do that or not. You're not required to do that in this project, but because it has been identified, any future projects that we do in that building, that will have to be part of the base scope for that down the road. Okay. And then door system replacements. We are in this building replacing all the hardware similar to what we did at Layton and some of the other buildings with the lockdown style, which allows the teachers to lock down the classrooms in a situation without actually having to open the door and use a key to lock from the outside. That is part of the base bid of the project. What this addresses is, because there's kind of different vintage doors throughout that building, replacing the doors, and again, it's another aesthetic thing, so it all blends with new. Again, because it's primarily aesthetic and not functional, we're recommending that we just pause on that for now. Any doors, though, that have been noted during our field work that were damaged or need to be replaced, they are part of the project, and there were very few of those, as any. And then the basis of designs, those are just Train and Siemens. They were zero-cost alternates, which means the contractors included those in their scope for their bids, which is good, and we're saying we need to recommend awarding those, because if we don't, and down the road, they want to provide a different type of equipment, you wouldn't have a leg to argue with them on. So it's just a security measure on that, protect the district. Any questions on that? Okay.
Okay. So just so the board knows, all contractors have been reviewed, qualified, and verified by the design construction management team as being responsive and understanding of the project scope, schedule, and budget. And then contracts should be awarded contingent upon receipt of acceptable bonds and insurance verifications, including review and approval by the district's legal and insurance counsels and other required documents for the successful bidders. Want to share a little bit about that?
Correct. So we, as your design and construction team, after the bids, we go through, we basically interview each of the contractors. There's an extensive checklist that we go through to make sure they are meeting all the requirements of the work. They also had to provide a qualification statement, which is a large document that shows they're financially solid and can do the work, litigations that may or may not be out there, all this type of information that you would want to have on a company that you're going to engage into a contract with. So we get this information, which kind of forms the acceptability of recommendation. Once we do the recommendation letter and the district chooses to take the next step, then those contractors are required to provide proof of bonding, insurances, certifications, those types of things. And those things are then forwarded to your insurance and legal counsel for their review. They also review a draft of what is the contract that they'll be initiating as well to make sure the language is in there. So we dot the i's, cross the t's, and then we work with your councils to make sure that all the legalities and all the supports there are there to protect the district from any contractual risks. They submit that information. We send them then the contracts for their review and execution, and then we send that all to council for review and final approval before the board signs off and is committed to the relationship with the contractors. Okay? Any questions on that? Lisa?
So just on the, thank you for explaining what's included and what's not included. It seems to me, like to Heather's earlier point, that if we're going to be doing the other bathrooms, like, I don't really know why we would leave out a bathroom in Minetto, especially near the cafeteria where, kids, I don't know if there's another bathroom ADA accessible that's close enough by there, but,
There are. So
Oh, okay.
there's a set of bathrooms on the opposite side of the cafeteria that has an ADA stall in each of them. They're not a unisex
Craig,
bathroom.
can you give her the mic so that way he can pick it
Oh,
up
sorry.
for people who are watching the video?
I'm going to ruin your toys. Sorry about that.
So yes, there is a bathroom. There's a boys and girls on the other side, but it's multiple stalls, and there is an ADA in each, so it is there. But there is not a single-use bathroom down near the cafeteria. So that is why we made it an alternate, because initially it was not in the project. SED picked up on it in their review, So we added it in. There are 2 bathrooms there currently. I would say they're probably used more by staff because they're off an office. But that was, a logical place to put them because the plumbing's already there. So but you are covered. You do have an accessible bathroom nearby.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I guess if, I don't know exactly what the situation would be, but like, are these kids who would have an aide who needs to go into the bathroom with them? And in that case, going into one with multiple stalls may be awkward, or I don't even know, do we allow adults in our bathrooms?
When they have to help kids like with changing or something like that, yes.
Okay.
So, you want to say something? Go ahead. I know.
Yeah. I guess I just want to
So
say,
they
for
could be-
$76,000, which is, not nothing, but in the scope of this, it just seems like if we're doing work, we should maybe just include it.
I mean, we certainly could. What we were trying to do was just be conservative, be careful, right? We did have some, like she said, there are some additional bathrooms that are down there. The main priority was the nurse's office. That was the main thing that we kind of saw that we truly needed to make sure we had an adaptable bathroom for. The areas that are downstairs, where people are already using it, we really don't have a lot of difficulty there. But if the board wishes to certainly add an additional one, we can. But that's why we just kind of didn't put it on there at this time. Now, in the future, we could also add it to, you don't have to do the ADA today. You could come back and like Craig said, it's possible we could try to go out and see if we can get some better pricing for that later on down the line, which might be a good idea given the current escalation cycle that we're in right now. But so we tried to take the priorities and the main things that we heard about, and that's what you see in yellow there at this point in time. So we just held off on that one for now because there is another one not too far away, and people are using it now, basically. So
And there's a big advantage to, once you have contractors on board, to be able to have these conversations, say, listen, that's a little bit high for what we want to spend on that. Now that you're here and you can, stick your head above the ceiling and knock a wall down, tell us what, we really can do. Try to help us out with, minimizing the costs on that. And they sometimes bring to the table things we didn't even think of, just from their experiences and things. So we will never halt those types of conversations if that's of interest. So just because you're not selecting it as part of this recommendation does not mean you don't have to get it done. You can still have those options or opportunities.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Yep. Okay.
Okay.
Anything
Any other
else?
questions from the board before we move on? Okay. All right, so that's the bid information. Now, we have also in front of you tonight the 2018 Capital Project Financial Report Summary as of this month, 2/10. We had some questions around, what were the actual expenditures around the capital project? Where do we stand as of today? And I'm going to have Craig and Amy go through that today with us.
So if you're not too familiar, I just want to give a little summary of how this document is structured, so that you'll understand how the numbers add up. So column C is the pre-ref project budget. Those are the numbers that we put together during the pre-ref they're basically like square foot budget numbers that we assign. And then we also have contingencies that are part of those numbers, as well as the incidentals. The bid contract value to work, which is the next column in D, you'll see for rows 1 and 2, which are phase 1 and phase 2, that those numbers are populated. Those are the ones that we have from those bids when we did that work. Columns E and F, those are our allowances. So we have an allowance contingency that is built into the contract bids. And then we also have what's in your other pocket, a construction contingency for anything that, comes in that might not be able to be covered by the allowance portion of that. So the total of those two contingencies is $4.775 million that's built into the project. As you can see, for phase 1 and 2, those items are populated. I want to draw attention to row 1 for phase 1. You'll see that under the column F, there's a negative. We actually had a $50,000 allowance that was built into their contract. We only utilized $2,971 of that $50,000, so they credited back the unused allowance, and that goes into the construction contingency pocket. Okay, so that's kind of, I think Thomas mentioned this in previous meetings, you know, what happens to that money that's not used, it rolls over. It rolls over into the construction contingency, okay? You'll see also in row 2 that we had $400,000 of allowances built into the contracts. We used $400,000 of that money. We used all of our allowance. And then we used a portion of the construction contingency, which I think was budgeted at $500,000. We used $351,000 of that. Okay. You'll see that in row 3, there's a highlighted number. So we updated this based on the bids that came in and the recommendation that we were suggesting, which brings us at 8.789655 for what will be the contract value to the contractors. Okay. This varies from a previous form. I think we had originally pre-bid budget of $9.7 million, based on my memory. So the net difference in that isn't going in the good direction. It's going down from what we had the estimators and the construction manager provide for their estimates. So that number in column J, which was, I think, 3.2 or 3.4 million, was actually knocked down to 2.5 million, okay? The other items for Phase 3B, which is the middle school, Phase 4 and Phase 5, those numbers are updates based on current conditions that we're seeing. I will say that the estimate we had from the construction manager on 3A was more detailed because we had more detailed drawings. Phase 3B, we're just starting to get into the design work, so his estimate was more of a square foot contingency type budget based on what information was available at the time. So as we've reviewed this in the facilities committee, this is kind of a step-by-step approach, and this is part of, you know, being fiduciary wisdom of managing a capital project. You're going to be getting these numbers updated as we get more detailed information provided. So for example, in the middle school, when that gets submitted to the state ed department, our CM is going to be doing another estimate. This number will get updated, and you'll see how that affects the bottom line moving forward. The biggest thing to say is that this is a tool that we're using so that you're planning, or you're pre-planning, you're being proactive in managing what work is getting done and what the priorities of the district are as we move stage or phase by phase, if that makes sense. So you'll see at the bottom, we've used, I'm going to say column or row 8 of our contingencies. We've used about 15%. So 15% compared to having approximately 46% of your work in place is a really good data point. We got a lot of money that we have saved to address changes and things like that, and we've barely touched it, okay? If the project keeps trending, that means there's going to be more of those contingencies available to offset the bottom line. Running down, we had, so basically we've been working with 63.1, which is kind of our budget, which was established at referendum. We've spent to date with phases 1, 2, and the local share of the soils project, approximately $28.9 million. We have remaining about $34.2 million. The remaining work estimates for 3A, 3B, 4, and 5, and actually it's less than 3A now that we have those numbers, is about $42 million, and the difference is about $7.9 million. Keep in mind that $4 million in contingencies is part of that $7.9 million. So as we go phase to phase and we don't utilize those funds, that reduces that number more towards zero. Okay?
Can I ask a quick question on that? So I understand that part of the contingency. So that contingency refers to all the scopes? Like, not all the scopes, all the phases?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, got it.
Yep.
Craig,
Yes,
we talked the other day, also, Phase 2 has not been closed out yet, correct? So that
Phase
number-
1 and 2, the final paperwork is still being done, so I think they're close to the final cost reporting stage of that. Once we get that information from fiscal advisors, we will update that, but basically, The only thing that will probably change is column H, which is the incidental side, because the contracts, the change orders, all that work has been completed. And we're still carrying the conservative value that we had established in those. So we're trending that those numbers will most likely go down as well, which will lower the difference, if that's the right, minimize the difference.
Yes.
Okay, I don't mean to be redundant, but just to clarify then, this $8,000 here that's over, your hope is not actually over. Your hope is that the trend will stay the same, that we'll actually realize less than what we're budgeting, and that will go down.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
We're being very conservative in our budgeting and our estimates. Our construction manager wants to make sure that we always keep the conversation in the forefront of, this is where we're seeing the numbers, this is where we're seeing the market conditions, those types of things, so that we're planning accordingly with what we decide for alternates, if we pull scope out, if we put scope in other areas, those types of things. So it's really more of a management tool than it is to say you're over budget or under budget. You're just working on managing and controlling the expenses.
Right. So we had recently, not too long ago, when we were talking about this before when King was here, we had some media that got it wrong, to be quite frank. They basically went out and said, well, they're over by millions of dollars on the project. No, we're not. Actually, we're 46% into the project, and we've only spent 28 of the 63 million there. So again, there is, by the way, of this 7 million, there's over 4 million that's a part of that that's in contingencies. And then we have now escalated estimates because of the pandemic that we're going through right now. Does it mean that we're going to come in at that 7 million? Not necessarily, right? So hopefully we have outcomes like we had this time, which were really great. We thought we might come in about 9 million. We came in under that. And hopefully moving forward, things will continue in that direction as things get better with the pandemic. We're not certain, but that's the hope, right? Fingers crossed, yes. So just so we are clear, we're working with the media to make sure that we get it right this time so that people don't get the wrong impression. But that 7 million is just, hey, if things continue in that way, this is what we could face. But we're going to do everything we can to mitigate that and bring that down and continue to watch things. And keep in mind that part of that 7 million, again, 4 million of it is from your contingencies. You still have it, right? So just wanted to share that.
And I think that's also why it's really important to prioritize the alternatives or the alternates.
Yes.
As we go, because let's say things do get more expensive.
Right.
We're going to have less options as we go down the road. So
Exactly.
right now, we need to make sure we're making good decisions looking forward.
Yes.
Totally agree. Okay.
Any other questions?
And then you want to talk about the sheet? So we did, if there were questions about, so what were things spent on from phase 1 for phase 2, just as a reminder, what were those extra items that were paid for? The alternates that maybe were not there originally for phase 1 and phase 2. We did give a list of those so that people could see and know what was happening. You want to talk about this list a little quick, please?
Sure. So we did try to quantify, from the information we had, something that's been consistent in phases 1 and 2 is always market conditions. So as well as we prepare our numbers in conservative and with escalations and incidentals and contingencies, you still never know until you actually bid the project how things are going to come in. So we kind of outlined some scope items for the phase 1 and 2, which were not originally part of the referendum language. Like the auditorium lobby bathrooms, we were doing some work in the lobby, but those bathrooms, as you recall, were very dated to the original building in the 80s, I think, that auditorium was created. It was not accessible. It was something that the district really felt that was a high priority to do, so we included that and we did that work. So a lot of these you may or may not remember conversations at the time of bids for that work being selected. There was some work shifted. So originally, the middle school project was supposed to be part of this phase, but we only did the boiler replacement because that system was starting to fail. So that was actually shifted from a different phase to this phase. And you would say, well, why didn't that reflect in the future phases as a down? Well, it did. It just wasn't that drastic a down because of the increases in the other costs that we're experiencing. And then as well as, we got into the floodplain issue with the city, modifying of that, and it kind of the two rectangular fields that were reconstructed at Wilbur, they were actually supposed to be one of the last phases of the project in Phase 5. So that work kind of got scoped up into this phase, okay? But those are kind of where we quantified and feel that the over budgets were associated with, and I hate to say over budgets, but those were the numbers we experienced for those phases and for that work. Okay.
Okay. So we just wanted to make sure, we have some new board members on who weren't on, including, I wasn't here back in 2018, but we wanted to share with you what happened, what was done, what were the extra items that were done in those phases, the alternates that were added, whatever else have you, so that you would have a historical reference of what took place. And again, this document, we just wanted to share with you in case there were any questions about future planning. Any other questions for Craig or for Amy from King King, or for Tom? He's on too. Hi, Tom. Any questions at all tonight?
I just had one quick question. It says here, you described it as today we would be approving just the bids, and then from there, the, contracts and the companies will get interviewed and make sure they have all of the necessary insurance and what have you. This says that that's already been done. All contractors have been reviewed and
We've done
qualified,
the
so.
pre-qualification process, which
Okay.
is actually, I'll send through Dr. Calvin the checklist that we go through, that they have to sign off and certify that, they're agreeing to certain things. And it's just like, you understand that the allowances are built into your bid, yes or no, those types of things. So what happens is if the board grants us acceptance of our recommendation letter, we provide letters of intent to the district that they distribute on their letterhead to those specific contractors. That tells them that there's an intention to enter into contract with them, and they need to provide their bonds, insurances, their AIA qualifications, which kind of goes into some of the background of their business and, the solidity, how solid their business is, those types of things. And then they submit those things to, through our office. We distribute to Tom. We distribute to your insurance carrier for their review to make sure it meets the requirements of the contract and the language that we submitted. They say, yes, you're good to go with that. And then we send them the actual contract for them to sign. And then that comes back. Tom will get to review that again and then give you the direction of whether to proceed or not into that relationship.
Okay, and then it'll come back to us again.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Real quick clarification here, so I got it in my mind. So it just kind of struck me here, as you were saying that the middle school was originally in phase 2,
A portion of it, yes.
portion of it, and that the stadium was actually in phase 3 or after. So when we look at these pre-ref
was it?
budgets, the
I
saying
think
that
so.
the pre-ref budget was 24.5 mil. That pre-ref budget had the middle school part and didn't have the stadium.
No, that pre-ref was basically the work that was outlined in phase 2.
So you went and redid the pre-ref.
Yes, based on the scope that was being done.
Okay. Good. All right, board. Any other questions?
I just want to say I appreciate this as a snapshot and just kind of reinforces, and we're going to have to, every time we come to these points, look at everything and get a good snapshot so we're clear on where we're going. And I just, repeating what Dr. Calvin said, just so we make those decisions that are all education-based as we move forward and keep that in the forefront of our mind, that those are the decisions we'll have to make. So thank you. I appreciate this. This
Definitely.
works well.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, just thank you so much for Tom and everyone being here.
Sure.
Appreciate the patience as we work through this.
Definitely. Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you much. Thank you. Okay, Tom, thank you very much. You can hang out with us if you like to, or whatever you like. So you just, yes, we'll call you back when we're ready for you in the next part. Okay, thanks, Tom. All right. Okay, board, we're going to shift gears now. Just wanted to talk to you a little bit about another part of our budget as we're kind of moving through the budget season. Oh, boy, this is not working for me here today. And we want to just share a piece around transportation. So each year, we do look at the fleet that we have in the district to see where we're at with the fleet and if there are any needs. We did spend some time talking with Tom, and after doing some, again, review of the fleet, what's clear to us is that we do need some additional buses, and we want to just kind of go over that tonight for your consideration, and just to get any questions or thoughts from you. So, the transportation department, what we're looking at is 9 64-passenger diesel C2 buses, and one 37-passenger 3 wheelchair diesel C2 bus, one of those buses, excuse me. Now, the cost for that is a total estimated cost not to exceed $1.3 million. The district would need to bond for these buses, and due to the fluctuations in the number of buses approved in the purchase each year, what's happening is that we're a little bit behind on the cyclical replacement plan. I believe last year when I started, I shared that, when I came in and just kind of review what we're doing, we had some concerns about how we're doing with respect to the fleet. So generally, what you like to see in districts is that buses are kind of turning over like every 5 years. Just like with our cars, right? There's a warranty on it, and the longer you kind of play this out, the more the prices go up and up and up, in terms of parts, in terms of the work and the maintenance, the detail that has to be done on the buses. And we got kids on the buses. So generally, you like to see, in the best case scenarios, buses turning over every 5 years. We've been on anywhere between a 7 to 10 year cycle, and that's caused some challenges and concerns. And so we certainly want to try to move to that 5-year piece as quickly as we can, but we wanted to just share with you where we were about these 10 buses. So Nancy, if you want to kind of go over some of these slides here with us, please, if you could.
What you can see on the slide is a history and the year purchased of all of our buses, what type of bus they are, whether they're a 66-passenger bus, a full-size wheelchair bus, a small wheelchair bus, a small regular bus, or an SUV, and then the mileage that is on those vehicles. Anything in yellow are the buses that we plan on replacing should the proposition get approved by the voters. And then the one in green is one that the voters approved last year. We still haven't gotten it in yet. No, it has not. So you can see that one of our oldest buses is from 2012, and we have a bunch in 2013. Next slide, Matt. Oh,
Gotcha.
sorry.
No problem.
Sorry. And then it goes on. We have buses in 2000 that are from 2014 and 2015 with various mileage. You want to keep going, Dr. Calvin? Because there's a summary slide at the end. And then 2017, we did buy a large grouping of buses, as you can see, including one full-size wheelchair bus. Next slide. And again, in 2018, we purchased some more buses. In 2019 to 2020, we purchased a variety of buses, 66 passenger, some small wheelchair, and some small buses. And then in 2021 and 2022, it's showing where we are currently with our bus fleet. So what does this mean? So in 2000, we have one bus that still is remaining in 2012. We have 7 full-size passenger buses from 2013. 2014, we have 7 full-size passenger buses, 1 full-size wheelchair bus. 2014, we have, did I already do that one? Sorry, I don't have my glass. I can't see close or far here. Basically. I'll look at this. 2015, we purchased one small wheelchair bus and one small bus. 2017, we had purchased 15 buses, that was the year, so one full-size wheelchair bus. 2018, 5 full-size buses. 2019, 4 full-size buses, a small wheelchair bus and a small bus. 2020, 4 regular-sized buses, a small wheelchair bus and a small bus. 2021, 3 66-passenger buses, 1 full-size wheelchair bus, and 2 SUVs. In 2022, 1 full-size wheelchair bus, which we're still waiting on, right now we have a total of 46 regular passenger buses, 4 full-size wheelchair buses, 3 small wheelchair buses, 4 small buses, and 2 SUVs, for a total of 59 transportation vehicles. So the plan is, from there, is to purchase the 9 66-passenger vehicles and 1 full-size wheelchair bus for a total of 10. We will send to auction 9 of the buses that you saw, including 1 full-size wheelchair. So our fleet will remain at 59 buses, but we will be getting a newer fleet and hopefully get back on our rotational schedule for maintenance.
Any questions from the board on that?
Nancy, can you just explain how we actually get reimbursed
From the
the
state?
following year for buses?
So a couple things happen. We get transportation aid on any buses that we purchase. And we usually do reconcile our bonding so that our bonding comes due in the following year after the referendum. So we really don't pay for them in the year that we purchase them. And it has worked out very well for not only the tax cap calculation that we have to do, but also in terms of bonding. And as I said, we get state aid back on our buses, and it follows the year in which we purchased them.
The transportation aid percentage, you want to, sure.
It's about 86%.
So,
And can you also explain, I know this, but not everyone does, that when we send our buses to auction, because our bus garage takes such good care of our fleet, what happens when they go to auction?
Absolutely. So when I came to the district, we were getting $1,000 a bus as a trade-in value. I worked with Auctions International, and they will take our buses and they put it on a public site. We auction our buses, and we usually can get between $20,000 or up on many of our buses because of the low mileage on some of them, and because of the care that has been taken in the transportation department. You might wonder why we are getting rid of some of our buses, even though their mileage is not high. It is because in city driving with the buses, the stop and go, there is a lot of wear and tear on these buses and a lot of maintenance. So that's why they try to turn them over frequently.
Yeah, I just had a question, Nancy. What's it going to take for us to get back on schedule? Or if we want to get up to that point, we're going to have to play catch-up.
You know, I haven't looked at that, Tom, but I would think probably
catching up, buying more buses quicker.
2 more years of
Larger purchases?
large purchases, and then we could get on that
A 5-year
rotational
cycle?
schedule again.
Okay. Because at that point, we'd step, if we're turning at 5 years, we'll have a better value on return also. We're
Absolutely.
not sitting on this long. Okay. Thank you.
Nancy, can you also comment on, I mean, we're buying diesel buses, but obviously there is emission concerns, you know, at the state level and legislation passing and what have you when it comes to vehicles. So how are we going to make sure that what we're buying is going to be able to be used for at least the full 5 to 6 years that we want to have it on the road?
Certainly. So there is legislation that is coming out to have electric buses by 2027. That's the goal. We would be able to, all of the buses that we currently have would be grandfathered in. Anything after that would have to be electric if it passes through the law. But there are a lot of obstacles up to that point. And as Dr. Calvin was saying earlier, things change daily. Right now, the cost of an electric bus compared to a diesel or a gas bus is 3 times the cost. So that would be like $300,000 a bus. Not to mention the infrastructure that would have to be built into the transportation department to have the plugs and things built in for that. So, things change every day. But right now, if it were to happen today, we would be grandfathered in.
So I was actually, thank you for that, because I was going to bring up something similar that, I think for the future, so there have been school districts that went, like the Bethlehem, Pennsylvania School District went to electric buses, and there is an investment up front for changing the infrastructure, but also electric buses have fewer moving parts, and diesel, there are expenses built in that we don't recognize to the diesel buses just because we've been doing it forever. And New York State they did identify some places to get grants to get buses, and we were not one of those places, which I get, they're probably looking at more urban areas, but I think this is something, Tom and I tried to do the advocacy day, which we couldn't even advocate for appointments. However.
We advocated.
We
There's just no one.
advocated, but we didn't, there was no, but anyway. But that would be something I am certainly, want to put into our thing that to begin to incentivize these kinds of changes. So thank you for asking that question.
Okay, any other questions? Everybody good? Okay, so, what we'd like to do at our next meeting, we'd like to bring information to the board around these 10 buses again, and you'll see that in the next agenda, basically. Okay, so tonight I just want to introduce some information to the board. I'd like to come back at the next board meeting and spend more time looking at cost and some other pieces that are invested in this. But tonight I just want to introduce a little bit and share some information here that we have been thinking about for the district. So as you all are, and again, we want to make sure we take enough time, let me just back up for a moment, and really spend time talking this through. And so, we'll be back at the next meeting, and if the board needs more meetings, we'll take our time to do so. We just want to make sure everybody is good and clear about what we're doing. So recently, we updated our organization chart. This is the reorg chart that we did for this year. And in it, we added the new director of ELA and math positions, and the assistant director for business was also added to that chart. Now, we want to kind of talk about moving forward, what do we do as a district? So we are a district right now that is in transition. Just a couple things. We have a high number of people who will soon be leaving us, especially in leadership positions. Some of them have tried to give us their letter of resignation because they want to retire, and I continue to put it into the shredder and say no. But we have at least one who's done that a number of times. But it's all good. But we have a number of people who will soon be transitioning into the retirement time. And so as we are experiencing that, we certainly want to be prepared for that. At the same time, I've had some time to really assess and see how things are working in the district. And there's some things that we'd like to do a little bit differently than what we have done before. There are some areas that we will need some assistance with, and you'll hear that a little bit as we kind of move to the next slide. But I just wanted to share what we'd like to see, if at all possible, for our district in terms of organization and leadership organization, basically.
Dr. Calvin?
Yes, please.
Is it my understanding as I look at this reorganizational chart that you're looking at 7 new job?
No. Let me just pull it up.
You've got the assistant superintendent,
Yep. So let me go to that slide.
assistant director, executive personnel, executive director of curriculum and instruction. You have assistant director of special ed, which I think that is added, isn't it?
Yes.
And director of ELA and
not-
director of math. That's 7 new positions.
So let me just kind of work through them, and then I can explain a little bit better.
You're talking right into the mic, and I can't.
I'm sorry. Let me work through them, and I can explain. Some of these are going to be a swap out, an exchange for something that we currently have.
Okay.
Okay? So here, we'll go to that right now, and I can share with you some of that. So yes, there are some new positions that we are looking for. So we've already talked a little bit about the math and the ELA position, and also the assistant director position. So those are 3 positions, okay? All 3 are new. We don't currently have them, all right? Now, there's a couple of things here. So first of all, we have right now an executive director of personnel and secondary education. So what we'd like to do is kind of switch some things around. We've talked before about all of the duties that have been included in that particular job. There are over 40 of them, right? And so what we want to do is kind of take some of those duties, reshift them to other areas, and basically really make it so that in this particular executive director area, it would really be focused on personnel, meaning onboarding, the benefits, all of the day-to-day labor relations management, all of those things would be in that particular position. So that's the first thing. So we currently have an executive director position there, and what we'd like to do is just shift that position. So that really isn't a new one. That really is one that's just being shifted in terms of the way that it's structured. Okay, so that's one. The next one, in terms of executive director, is the executive director for curriculum and instruction. So currently, we have a person who is in the executive director for elementary instruction. I'm sorry, the full title, and accountability right now. Thank you. And so as this person shifts out and goes into the world of retirement, it's all good, right? She can stay and hang out. But anyway, as that person shifts out, what we'd like to do is restructure that position as well. So that's another swap out, one for another one, basically. And what we want to do is really move from those 2 positions, some of the things that have been happening with the schools, right, basically. So they have K through 5 and then 6 through 12. So we're pulling those off of those executive director positions. And one's focusing primarily on all the personnel matters. Again, we have over 700 employees. That's quite a bit in its own. And then the next function is really for curriculum and instruction. So what we're looking for is alignment with respect to curriculum and instruction, and really to help increase and continue to do better as a district, basically. And so really this person is going to be focused on the ELA, the math, science, social studies, instructional technology, physical education, and athletics, and also working with our team leaders as well. So really, the focus is all on instruction, right? And making sure that the professional development is occurring, making sure that the curriculum mapping is happening, the daily instructional program is really continuing to move forward. So that's a swap. Again, we already have someone in an executive position, like the personnel. Those are 2 swaps, okay? And then the third piece now is with respect to special education and student services. So currently, we have a director of special education, all right? And what we'd like to do is make the special education and student services portion their own department, basically. So currently, that department runs underneath the executive director of elementary education and data, and accountability, and so that's a lot. Having been a special education director and a person who's run specialized programs, that is a whole process to itself. It's a whole entity by itself, basically. We have over 300 children with IEP programs, almost twice that with at least 300 of those, I think, with 504 plans, if I remember correctly, maybe a little bit less. And that doesn't even come into contact with all the preventative services. So speech and language to help prevent kids from, moving forward with more, direct services around speech and language. There's just a number of things that are there under that area. So what we'd like to do is basically take the current special ed position we have now and make it an executive director position. So that person would report directly to me. They would be responsible for all the special education as they currently are now. And the other piece underneath that, So we currently have a director of student services. This individual currently manages a number of things. All of the student services, in addition to hearings, Heidi, please help me, nurses. Yes. So what we'd like to do is really kind of restructure this a little bit. When that individual does come to the time when they're ready to retire, what we'd like to do is make a swap again, right? That particular position will be a little bit restructured here. So what we would do is make that a position that's really focused on the student services, OT, PT, speech. We're after quality and trying to really focus in to accelerate the growth of the students, right? And making sure we have more attention and eyes and ears on those services. So there's the whole CESC process, there's the 504 process, there are preventative services, and then there's the actual student services that are there. So we want to take again, it's a swap, right? So the current director position would become an assistant director position. They would work with the executive director of special education and student services, okay?
Could
yes.
we get a total cost of
Yes,
the added
yes.
positions before we approve it?
Yes, absolutely,
Okay.
yes.
The other question I have too, I know that there is, I can't think of her name, but she's kind of coordinating the coaching, the reading coaching.
Instructional coaching?
Who?
Instructional coaching, is that what you mean? The reading instructional coaching?
Yeah. So what happens to her when you go?
So all of those people would work under the executive director for curriculum instruction, right? We would not lose instructional coaches. We still need those people in place. But the reading coaches would work under the director of reading. Math people who are there to help coach math would work with math. But they would continue on, but work with specifically the person who was focused on ELA or math.
But I wish I could remember her name, Heidi. Yes. So she seems to be coordinating what's going on with the coaches. So what happens to her position? And I'm going to follow that up with maybe Heidi or Carrie can answer this. The coaching that's going on right now, has there been training for these coaches as to what their task should be and understanding their task?
They meet monthly. They actually had a meeting today in which they had one of the representatives from Ockley come in and do a whole training on coaching. So they spent the entire day together today going through coaching and the coaching model. So yeah, they have been meeting and we have been going through coaching, what it looks like. We've had numerous conversations, and we're going to do a book study on coaching.
Do they have an understanding that to build trust with their mentors, the reading teachers that they're mentoring, that they are not evaluators and that they should not be going back to the principals in the buildings and giving any input? And I'm very concerned that they don't have an understanding of that.
They definitely have an understanding of that.
What did you say?
So,
They definitely have an understanding of what their role is in terms of coaching. They're not evaluative, and they're.
But they shouldn't be talking to the principal about,
well, just to be clear, that's not necessarily true. So coaches, they do work with principals. They do have, I just want to be clear, they do have conversations with principals. They work with the reading coordinator that's there, but they're not there to be the principal. They are not there to be the assistant principal. They are not there as an evaluator. They're there to help, to support, to model, and to make sure that people are on track with what needs to be done. So they're not there as the principal, right? So now when there's a coaching piece that happens, right, having been a former...
but if you've got, I'm going to interrupt you. If you have a coach going into a room and building that level of trust and a working relationship where they can make mistakes, get feedback, and grow. If that coach, and I ran a building, so I'm talking from experience. If that individual goes back to the principal and has a discussion about what she's seeing in that room, it's unethical.
I'm wondering if this is a discussion we should have, not underneath the reorganizational chart, but like really talking about, I guess, the function of
The coach.
coaches, because I really respect your experience, Linda, and I'm kind of lost, given that I'm thinking about the chart. So I'm wondering if that's a very important conversation to have, talking
No,
about.
I'm just throwing them out because I have an understanding of what might be going on in some buildings. And I'm so glad to hear they're getting the training and that they're having conversations. But they were rolled out pretty quick, and yet they didn't have a director that was making sure that they had an understanding of what their task is. So I just had to throw it out.
Thank you, Linda. Thanks.
So just to kind of go back, sure. Okay.
So, right now, Carrie is overseeing the director of special ed,
Mhm.
the director of student services.
Yes.
As I'm understanding it, these two positions, one would become, not necessarily these individuals or which title goes with which, but basically we're looking at those two becoming an executive director for special ed and student services, and an assistant director.
No. Well, there's an executive director of special ed and student services, yes. That's the person who's over all of it. And then there would be an assistant director of student services, 2 positions total. That is correct. 2 for 2, just used a little differently, that's all.
What is the significance of 2 directors versus an executive director and an assistant?
Right. So,
Should these 2 directors be answering directly to you or to the assistant superintendent? I guess in the naming of positions, is there some significance?
yeah. So I think it's the amount of responsibility that the person would be responsible for, right? The special ed portion, again, there's a lot to it, right? So it's the special ed, there's special ed data reports, there is CSC chairing for meetings, there's 504 planning, there's preventative service, there's a lot to it. And honestly, right now, that person is working under the direction or working through the executive director, which is quite a bit to kind of manage and work with. Now, all of these folks, right, I work with all of them no matter what, right? But they really need to be their own entity. They really need to be their own separate section, right? And it's not, Carrie does not try to hold them into a box, basically, but they really need to kind of just be their own section. They need their own person who can kind of just move things forward in their own direction. So we would want to use them just a little bit differently than we are right now. So that one person would come directly through the superintendent as opposed to through the person who's doing curriculum and instruction. They would not be answering to the curriculum instruction person. The curriculum instruction person is freed up from the special ed piece and really able to focus on the day-to-day teaching and learning that's happening in the district, right?
So there is a functional difference between an executive director and a director.
Yeah, well, yes, there is. An executive director has a little more responsibilities, more on their plate. So when Carrie is leaving, there's a lot of things she does with special ed, right? Compliance, being able to do, again, all of the state reports for New York State. There's a lot that goes into that. Many grants for 611 and 619 all go under that. Whenever there's an indicator report that's due to the state, and every year we have different indicators that we have to go and report on. Those things are done really through Carrie's office with support from Lisa. Well, now that would shift from off of that curriculum and director person, and that would be now under just the special ed and student support services person.
Carrie, maybe you can help us remember, before the, what really happened was in the horrible budget season of 15-16, we consolidated a lot of jobs, and that's how these precious women got their very expansive jobs. So, which they have done with a lot of grace and capability. But can you remind us and the public the structure prior to that?
We had,
It's okay.
we had the assistant superintendent, and under the assistant superintendent was director of literacy, director of mathematics, director of data and accountability. And there also was a director of special ed and an assistant director of special ed. Am I forgetting any? And obviously, there was the director of personnel.
Right, which over the years was different titles, an assistant superintendent at one point and a director of human resources, but there was a separate person who just oversaw personnel by itself.
And there also were TOSAs for, we had a TOSA for literacy at the elementary level, a TOSA of math, a TOSA of science, a TOSA of tech, and we did have a TOSA for the secondary. I believe it was literacy, but not math, yeah.
So this doesn't look exactly like how it was, however, it does start to piece apart the jobs back to kind of their original purpose. And so it kind of goes to what Linda's talking about too, just in terms of, having leadership in the right places.
So,
I did have a follow-up. No, it's not a follow-up, it's completely different. Can we get a key, or not get it, can we have an explanation of the differences, a green box, a red box, a yellow lettering, a white lettering, kind of? I imagine there's significance to it, right?
sure,
I'm just wondering what that is.
sure. And I'll bring some of this back at the next meeting.
Okay.
Absolutely,
Good
yes,
enough.
we can
Thank
give
you.
you a key. That sounds good. No worries. Yes, we can do that for sure. Most of the ones that are in yellow are things that are different, and there may be some cost to them. However, there's been some changes. So let me bring you an updated key, and that'll help, okay? That'll be great, no problem. Okay, so we've got 4 basic, I'm gonna call them buckets, not calling the people buckets, but 4 different areas, okay? So we have business and administration is what we'd like to have, personnel, curriculum and instruction, and special education. And these are the 4 functions of district office, right? We have a special ed function, we have a business function, we have a personnel function, we have a curriculum and instruction function. And we'd have someone over each of those areas, okay? The only other, in terms of administrator piece that's extra here, I'm going to go up to the top. So I am looking to bring in an assistant superintendent of schools. I do need some help and some support. And what we'd like to do is restructure and take some of these duties. So our assistant director of student services is doing some of these things. Carrie is doing some of these these Heidi is doing some of these things. And so what we'd like to do is take some of those extras. Like we had 40-something things that they were doing. Take some of those critical extras off and move them to another person who can assist us. And that would include managing the IT department, IT information technology department, registration, security, code of conduct kinds of things, hearing process, special projects that we have, and we have every week. There's something that's coming up that we're working on. And assisting and working with the superintendent with K through 12 principals, basically. So we'd like to kind of move that around, restructure that piece there. And the goal is really to try to make it, again, so that we can get optimal performance for our district. And some of that, again, is we have some people who are just overloaded. And it's just the structure, the way that it is, it's strained, and it's not working as productively as we'd like for it to do. Just to again say, so at our next meeting, I wanted to just introduce what we're looking for this meeting. At the next meeting, I'm going to come back and I'm going to provide codes or code information. I will also come back and provide pricing. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about the functions of the position and again, why those positions are needed. Does that make sense for the board? Okay, so I just wanted to introduce, to share. So I hope I was able to answer your questions. Some of these are swap outs, basically, and then there's a couple of them that are new. Okay? Mm-hmm. I hear you, right. And luckily, hopefully, and I'm keeping fingers crossed, we'll be in a much better place than where we were before a couple years back. And why am I saying that? Well, because state ed has already told us that the amount of aid that we're getting is being restructured, and there's more projected to come than we've probably ever had here before. We had a bump last year, and we know there's a bump coming this year. And so we certainly don't want to just go spending everything everywhere, right? We want to make sure that whatever we do, that it's effective, that it's targeted to really engage and support instruction and our operations. So I think we'll be in a much better place than we were before, to be quite honest with you. Okay? So we'll come back, and we welcome your feedback, board. We want to do what's best for the district. So we'll come back and we can talk some more. Does that sound good? Okay. All right. Thank you for your time. I think go ahead,
Oh,
Tom.
I had one thing I just wanted to come back. I mentioned this to Heather before, and I just wanted to get it out there relative to the public, relative to the capital project, and then relative to the budget as well, is just because we haven't talked about it, the soil remediation, that cost will be there, but it's a one-time cost, it's a one-off, and it will be taken care of the following year. But it will be a substantial increase, and I just think I want that to be present in the public's mind, so when they see that the potential $4 million, and go, okay, where did that come from? Knowing that it is not something that will be carried along. It's a one-off situation. So I just wanted to do that.
Thank you, Tom. One thing I also forgot, just want to make sure I mentioned to the board, at our last meeting, there was a request about analysis around dual credit courses and AP courses. So we now have the number of students. We're going to be sharing that before the week is out with the board. We are waiting on information from our BOCES folks around supporting students in dual credit courses. Can we do that with district funding, and how do we do that? We have heard that there are some instances currently going on across the state where that is happening through ESSA. So we want to get all of the particulars. It's around being able to provide equity and access for all students. So we want to make sure that we're clear about all of the particulars, what can be done from what can't be done. We want to be careful because there's some rules around funding, making sure that we can't give away public funds basically as gifting. So we want to make sure that things are done correctly, but that we do know that there are some instances where that is occurring. So we are going to work with our folks out at BOCES to get more information to be sure. And then with the AP courses, though, just in the interim, we have gone online, looked at some information from New York State. They have told us that there's a waiver process that you can go through for AP courses so that students don't have to pay for the exams themselves, basically. There's some waiver processes, especially for students who meet the criteria for free or reduced lunches. And there's some different practices going on even around that across the state. So I would say hopefully by week's end, I will have that information. I will share it with the board and bring it back also at the next meeting.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And then I think once we understand and kind of standardize everything, the next step would be making sure that our students and our families really understand process and procedure and such. So thank you.
Okay, I'm all set. Thank you, board.
Next on the agenda is the consent agenda, items A through G. Could I have a motion? Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next is curriculum with Carrie Platts.
The item that I have this evening is for the New York State textbook law. It is to approve a new textbook for instructional use for the AP English Lit and Comp course. And the title of the book is The Namesake by Johampi Lahari.
Motion, please.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next is personnel with Heidi Sweeney.
Good evening. We have two retirements this evening, so I'll do A and B separately. A, Whereas Carrie Plass has admirably served the students and staff of the Oswego City School District as the Executive Director of Elementary Education and Accountability, as well as a variety of other roles over the years, from January 31st, 1994, with full commitment to the best interests of all the students and worked in partnership with her fellow employees. Now be it resolved that the Oswego City School District hereby recognizes her dedication, and we express our sincere gratitude and appreciation for her years of service. Carrie will be retiring effective July 1, 2022. And then our second retirement is Jeffrey Chetney. Has admirably served the students and staff of our school district as the warehouse coordinator from August 7th, 1985, with a full commitment to the best interests of all students, and worked in partnership with his fellow employees. And we hereby recognize his dedication and express our sincere gratitude and appreciation for his years of service. And he'll be retiring effective February 28th, 2022.
Motion, please. Second?
A second.
All in favor? Or any discussion?
Discussion.
Excuse me?
Yeah, I want to first say thank you to Mr. Chetney for his many years of service. I've never had the privilege of meeting him, but I also wanted to just thank Carrie personally. Carrie and I don't go back as far as her whole career, but when Common Core came into play, she spent a lot of hours with me, really upset in her office. And she always greeted me with professionalism and that work ethic that she has brought every single day. And, you know, in recent years, taking on a title that nobody should have to take on, and she's done it, again, I just repeat, with a lot of grace and professionalism. So thank you so much for all you've brought to this district.
I would just like to piggyback on Heather. Thank you. You'll be greatly missed. I wish we could say no. But it's
we can.
well-deserved. That's the shredder, right? And Mr. Chetney, the knowledge that he has from this district is irreplaceable. Maybe he could give us a notebook. But again, that's another one I'd like to say, no, you can't. But certainly both of these individuals have well-deserved retirement. They've earned it. And best of luck to the both of them.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
The rest of our professional staff recommendations are items C through G.
Items C through G. Could I have a motion, please?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Our support staff recommendations are items H through N.
Items H through N. Motion?
I'll move it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next is Finance with Nancy Squires.
Items A through E for the board to accept the bid awards from the February 10th meeting as presented.
Items A through E. Motion, please. Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Oh,
You all right?
okay. Next is the student representative discussion. Zachary?
Good afternoon, guys. All right, let's see. Today, I got a couple things. First thing I wanted to talk about was, I know last meeting I brought up a little discussion about lunch revisements. So we went a little bit further on that outside. So we created a survey for the students to fill out with the help of Matthew Guai, the Director of Food Service, and just to discuss issues in the lunchroom and how we can collect appropriate data and make some changes. So straight from the survey, I'll list off what we have for you. First question is, how many days per week do you eat a school lunch? What are your favorite lunch options? So we can get an understanding of what students enjoy and what they don't. What food items would you like to see available? What are your favorite foods when eating outside of school? And what are some ways you think the school lunch experience could be improved? So that's what we have, and we'll take the data from the next 2 weeks. I'll bring you further at the next meeting, and that's the information that I have about that. We want to take note of students' experiences and just make the school a better place for them. Okay, next thing, just an idea thrown up in the air was a after-school intramurals. So we're going to create another survey for students to fill out. And we just want to do, it's just something to ensure students can stay connected during these times, no matter what their interest is. So the survey is going to include numerous options of activities and games and sports, just to see what interest students have. I know a lot of planning is required, facilities needed, staffing to run the clubs. But just wanted to mention this and spread awareness, just for our plans for the school, just to open more opportunities for social events. Okay, next thing I just wanted to, as Dr. Calvin mentioned, bring up the student musical. I heard that was a great success. The crew and students, everyone worked really hard. It was very successful. I did not, unfortunately, attend, but from everyone, I heard it was wonderful, and it was very impressive. So many issues and hoops jumped through with distancing and masks, and there was a significantly less amount of time to prepare, and they did it to the best of their ability, and it was amazing. The next thing was, I'm sure as you guys walked in here, saw the hearts on the lockers, and that was from the Key Club. Really glad to have a group to get us in the holiday spirit and spread positivity all year round. And the last thing I had, just an update on the forms. We check them periodically, and it's been a bit quiet. So, I mean, so it looks like we're doing our job pretty well. Yeah, that's everything. Thank you.
Next on the agenda is items from the board.
I actually have some just some thoughts for Zach before we move on to that. One is if the surveys I love, I mean, if you have any visuals that you want to put up, we can definitely do that, right? So if you want to bring the data in visual form,
Yeah.
we can definitely get that up there for people to see. So that's great.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I'll do that for next time.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You guys are so funny. As always, thank you to our administrators, our teachers, our support staff, all of you that are here for the students of our district. We appreciate you, and we thank you. Thanks.
Any other items from the board tonight?
We've talked about the musical, but I have to say something. We weren't able to have it last year. I'm telling you, the energy and the number of kids that were on that stage, and I got so excited that we had our musicals back. The staging was fabulous. Oh my gosh, I'm still excited about it. And I want all of the adults that brought those children together and were able to pull that off. The kids had masks on, and you could understand every word they said. So to those students and to the adults, great job, thank you.
I just have two things. One is, Heidi, maybe you can just quickly answer the question. As we talk about AP and the college credit and all of that, I was just doing a lot of research, and I noticed that some school districts, if you don't take the AP exam or you don't accept the college credit, which costs money, they actually won't give you the accelerated GPA. We do not do that, correct? Okay. Yeah.
No,
That was a
students
shocker for
do
me.
not have to take, pay for the tuition or take the exam to still have it considered to be an honors level weighted course.
And I think that's a very important distinction to express to students as they're trying to make up their minds, because when you go to then give your transcript to a college, they want to see that you did the work in the course, even more than what you got on your exam. So that was number one. And then number two is, I just wanted to present a concept to the board that we can discuss in another meeting, but just some situations came up that kind of illuminated for me a need to have a conversation around volunteerism in the school district, and maybe standardizing our approval process and how we may even recruit or accept volunteers, because there does seem to be some discrepancies between like what we expect for someone who wants to help with an athletic team versus, parents who volunteer for the band or the drama versus parents who come into a classroom. And I think, even in an era of, high security alerts and what have you, it's very important to engage parents and community in our school buildings. And to be able to do that safely is also very important. So I think it's a comprehensive conversation to have so that we standardize our process, and then we also understand, what circumstances are we really open to having volunteers come in or having people come in and engage with the district and what we do. So if other people are open to that conversation, I think it's definitely one. And maybe what we can do is kind of bring the policy we have, talk through some of the legalities that have changed, and see about making it, a standardized system.
You mentioned bring the policy. Do we have a formal policy on this, or is it one of those things that is a practice within the administration, but not a district policy?
I believe we do have a volunteer policy. I'm positive we do. I've seen it. So we do have one
Okay.
that we can bring in.
Well, it's
So-
easy to look at then.
And I'm just wondering too, if as we work through that other policy, maybe this is something the policy committee could discuss and then present it to the board, and that way we can kind of streamline the whole thing as well.
Sure.
That might be even better, I'm guessing.
Sure.
Because we do have a policy, but it's very general, and there's legislation has sort of changed and kind of tightened up as the need for security around certain circumstances has increased. So, which is why athletics is kind of being treated as different now.
Okay. Next on the agenda is the executive session. Would the board like to move to executive session? And for the reason of?
To discuss the performance, the employment history and performance of a particular staff member, proposed or pending current litigation, collective negotiations, and matters which could imperil the public safety if disclosed.
Could I have a motion, please? Move it. Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Would there be a need for a vote after executive session? Okay. We may move to executive session.